Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. And Landis, we are going fast today because we're going to tell people what we think about all 28 of our Northern teams with on-the-record predictions. Two men, 28 teams, 56 predictions. That's a full show.
It is a full show. Did you come out of this exercise feeling like maybe you were a little too hot on some of these teams? Because I sure did.
I think I just double checked it. I think I have only 5 Northern teams with losing records, which is I just want everybody to, I might
have fewer than that.
I want all Northern fan bases to be happy. And to be clear, people know this. I think we covered 28 Northern teams. If it snows or might snow on your campus, we talk about you in the power conferences. If you're in lovely, beautiful weather all the time, we don't talk about you. So there's 2 teams in the Big Ten that aren't in the North. I think I have UCLA going 0-17 to make sure that all the Northern Big Ten teams get the wins I think they need.
Yeah, I definitely have that happening in the Big Ten and also in the Big 12. There's going to be a few, I think, winless teams in the Big 12 if my record predictions become correct.
Yeah, everybody's beating Arizona State. Sorry to Arizona State.
Right. We
We don't care about you, but every time you're going through and it's like, Kansas, Colorado, Cincinnati, it's like, beat Arizona State. So that's what we're going to do here. But before we dive in, and so again, we're starting next week with a live show. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at noon, about to 1:30 every day, live on YouTube, a betting show Friday morning, a post-game show Saturday night. But we will make our playoff picks, Bill, next Wednesday on the live show, on the new relaunched Kings of the North. So this is not playoffs. This is not national champions. This is just regular season records because we have to lay this foundation first.
Yeah, we do. I was thinking about the playoff bracket as I was going through it too. Not necessarily, dictating wins and losses, but like thinking to myself how this would impact the playoff bracket as I was going through this exercise. Because spoiler alert, I got a lot of Big 12 teams with 10 wins. So we'll see how that plays out.
And it's interesting. You did do the schedule game with everybody? Like you took all 28 of our teams and went through win-loss. Yeah. I think it's the way that you have to do it. But I definitely within that try to find, I don't just think the best team's going to win every time, right? You look at bye weeks, You look at tough stretches, you look at road games, is someone playing on a Friday night after a long trip. And so you try to find maybe possible losses where an upset could be found, but I still wound up like you with a bunch of teams all lumped together.
Yeah, especially in the Big 12. I went through and did, I think this is definitely a win. I think this is definitely a loss. And if I think it's a toss-up, I'll put it in a toss-up for now and then come back to it. But then like in the Big 12, every game's a toss.
Every game's a toss-up, except Arizona State.
Arizona State. And Houston, too. Houston's also going 0-12.
And there is I think probably everybody's doing this. There's just such crazy travel now that I definitely factor that in. It's like, hey, who's traveling 3,000 miles twice in 3 weeks? Who has a really physical home game followed by a long trip? And when you're talking about, Northern Big 12 teams going to Florida, or this affects Oregon and Washington and Big 10 teams going to the West Coast, that certainly factored in. So I'll be very curious. We don't know. We sent our picks to our producer, Mike, separately. We don't know what our picks will be. We will make them in tandem. But real quick, couple news items, starting with Kirk Ferentz, the Iowa head coach, being suspended for the first game of the year because of a reported recruiting violation. They open with Illinois State. It does not affect my view of Iowa versus Illinois State. They play Iowa State in week 2. And this, I don't know the ins and outs of what happened, Landis, but this had at least some effect on my view of Iowa this year. Michigan had their head coach suspended for 6 games last year and still won the national championship. But it's just a monkey wrench for the Hawkeyes, isn't it, to not have Kirk Ferentz out there?
Yeah, and listen, if they were playing Iowa State in week 1, that gives you some serious second thoughts about that game. So, like against Illinois State, they'll be fine. It stems from some, I guess, like impermissible contact with Cade McNamara when Cade McNamara was in the portal 2 years ago. So that's what this is about. As long as this doesn't extend beyond this one game, and doesn't really sound like it's going to. Scott Docterman from The Athletic was the first person I think who broke the story. Didn't make it sound like it was going to go beyond that. So if that's the case, then I think I don't feel all that differently about what I think of Iowa this year. But yeah, it's not ideal.
And a bigger issue, and this is two teams, I will say both of these affected. These are two of the teams that I've been highest on in the offseason as kind of underdog, dark horse teams to keep an eye on. Iowa and Rutgers. For Rutgers, they lose Mohamed Toure, one of the best linebackers in the Big Ten. Not to give anything away, but you had done a rough, not a rough draft, like a first draft of our All North preseason team, and you had him on the team, but now he has been lost. This happened last week. He's been lost for the season with the torn ACL. For Rutgers defense that we've been talking about, is this a top 20 defense? This is a playmaker who's not going to be out there. This is a blow, man.
It's a really tough blow. Second time in 3 years, too, that Mohamed Toure has torn an ACL and missed a season. He does have a year of eligibility left if he wants to come back for 2025, but that obviously doesn't do anything to help Rutgers defense this year. He's a really good linebacker. He was on our All-North team postseason in 2023, which is why I had him on for preseason, or at least in my thoughts going into preseason for 2024. Obviously, a tremendously talented linebacker, but probably Rutgers' best pass rusher too. So it's a pretty big hole now that they need to fill on that defense. Still a very good defense. They have a ton back, but I don't know if they have a one-to-one replacement for Mohamed Toure. So I'm not really sure how they're going to figure that out.
All right, tough blow for Rutgers. And again, I told Greg Schiano at Big Ten Media Days I thought Rutgers was going to go 7-2 in the Big Ten. I'm not sure. I think Rutgers is going to go 7-2 in the Big Ten anymore. Players matter. Let's get to our picks. I have them in 4 batches so we can take a little breather in between, but we will make our picks together. And we are going to start with Notre Dame, our 3 ACC teams, and the 2 new West Coast Big Ten teams that are part of the North. So we will start. That's our first group. We're going to start with Notre Dame. What do you have as Notre Dame's record this season, regular season?
Yeah, I have Notre Dame at 10-2. I think the first time we maybe discussed what could happen this year, I was even toying with the idea of Notre Dame being undefeated and like kind of 11-1. As we've gotten closer to this opener against Texas A&M, I don't know that I love like a reworked offensive line going on the road to play against what I think is a pretty good defensive line. I think what a lot of people think is a pretty good defensive line. So I have them 10-2, losing that opener to Texas A&M. And then I figured they might drop one along the way. And the one that I circled there was they finished the season at USC, and it's the week after. It's the week after they play Army. And playing Army Navy tends to have a lingering effect on teams. And USC to me also feels like a team that could be maybe like not in the Big Ten title hunt, but maybe playing better football in the back half of the year than it does in the front half of the year. So that to me feels like it could be a tough matchup. So I gave them a loss there too. So I'm at 10-2.
I have USC at 1-11 to give all the Big Ten teams the wins they need to get. So like you were talking, I think you were more than toying with the idea of Notre Dame being better than this. I thought you were floating like undefeated Notre Dame definite playoff team at times during the course of the offseason. Weren't you? I felt like you were all in on Notre Dame.
I was, and I'm not all out now. I do worry a little bit about the offensive line. They're moving some guys around. They might be playing freshmen and sophomores, and I especially don't love it for the opener that they have. Over the course of the season, I think it'll probably still be a pretty good offensive line. So maybe I'm off on the second loss there to USC or to anybody else. They don't really have, I mean, Florida State and Louisville are probably the only other games you can look at and think to yourself they could lose. But I'm worried enough about the offensive line that I'm backing off a bit from. This team's going to go undefeated, but I think Notre Dame at 10-2 could still be a playoff team, right? I mean, maybe not if the losses are A&M and USC, but we'll see.
Yeah, I don't. All of a sudden, I mean, like, I guess if you think Florida State's going to compete at the top of the ACC, that's their best win. I don't. It's not a guaranteed playoff spot at 10-2.
Right.
That'd be a pretty crazy season to lose the opener, win 10 straight, and lose the finale.
Yeah,
I have them at 11-1. I have them winning the opener and then losing somewhere in there. I also threw in at Georgia Tech as maybe just a goofy game.
Yeah.
Losing
that game's in Atlanta, right?
I think that's right. Yeah, something in the middle of the season, like something weird in the middle. But is this? We're talking about like the Toure injury, that kind of thing. This Charles Jagusaw injury at left tackle has basically cost them a win in your mind. If he was healthy, would you have them beating A&M to open the year?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Probably.
Okay. Players matter. Players matter.
Yeah.
So I'm not calling you out. I am noting that I would have said one of the 5 things of Bill Landis's view of the season is that he's high on Notre Dame. I would have said that in July. And so I'm surprised that you're in at 10-2, but I think you've explained why.
Yeah, and I still like Notre Dame quite a bit. Just the question that I had about it is a little more magnified now.
Okay. All right. 11-1 for me, 10-2 for Bill. Let's go to Syracuse. We're there together. 8-4, 8-4. This is a pretty easy schedule. And if you think Kyle McCord is going to elevate Syracuse quarterback play with Rondé Gadsden back at tight end as a real playmaker, you like the backfield, the energy and the coaching ability of Fran Brown. They got some difference makers defensively in the portal. Like, there's just a lot to like here, especially when you zero in on the schedule. And there are some welcome Cal to the ACC kind of stuff, right? And they have some easy non-conference games. Like, they could be, they have a very good chance to start 4-0. They maybe could get to 5-0, but they have a chance to make some noise because the schedule's not that bad. So 8 is very doable, I think. I toyed with better than this.
I thought about better than this. The one thing that gave me a little bit of pause, and I'm actually not sure that I've seen this very often. They play 5 of 6 games on the road from October 5th to November 16th. They play 6 games. They're only home once.
Yes.
I thought it was a typo when I was looking through it. I was going through some other schedules. Like, is this actually correct? So it starts with a road trip to UNLV. Then they come back the next week and play at NC State. Then they're off. Then they're at Pitt. They get a home game against a good Virginia Tech team, and then they're at Boston College. Actually, they're at Cal too. Yeah. So it's a interesting stretch. Like, I don't know, within that group of teams, the best team is Virginia Tech, and that is the one game they get to play at home. But I don't know that they're coming away from all 5 of those road games like unscathed, right? So I think you're going to see a loss or 2 in there. I think they're going to lose like to NC State, which I think is a potential ACC champion caliber kind of team. But yeah, I mean, even with that tough stretch, like 8 seems very doable. I can definitely see a world where there's 9. Like, you beat Georgia Tech, I think that can get you to 9. Maybe you don't beat NC State, Virginia Tech, or Miami, but I think all the other 9 games you can make an argument.
They are home for all of September, and they do not play a home game in October.
Yeah.
It's wild.
It's odd.
I agree with everything you said. If they beat NC State in the middle of the year, we are going to enter can Syracuse win the ACC conversation. So that would be a huge road win if they get to that point. But 8-4 for a first-year coach. I mean, you can only play the schedule you play. It's out there for them. They should at least be a bowl team. But I think 8 is very doable. I think they're closer to 9 than they are to 7. And we agree with this 8-4. Let's go to Pitt. Pitt, I have at 7-5. You checked in at 6-6. I do think I was out at Pitt practice this week. There's some playmakers defensively. They have a lot back on the offensive line. They brought in a couple playmakers from Western Carolina who had played there with the new offensive coordinator, Cade Bell. I think there's a chance that there are some bumps along the way as they transition to an up-tempo offense where offensive linemen are going to be sprinting to the line of scrimmage. They have not named a starting quarterback as we talk about this, but I think it's because they like both competitors in Nate Yarnell and Eli Holstein. I think they have a chance to be better at the end of the year than they are at the beginning of the year. I also think they have a chance to lose a goofy game and win a game you wouldn't expect, because I think when this offense clicks, they're going to have people back on their heels. I also think they might make some mistakes, although they were happy in their last scrimmage. They only turned the ball over, I think, once, or they only had 1 penalty, in their last scrimmage when like the offense had 10 penalties in an earlier scrimmage. So they're picking it up. It's a huge transition, but I think it should get them back to bowl territory after a rough 3-9 season last year. And we're kind of on the same page here.
And I am a little more optimistic on this, I think, than I would have been a few months ago.
Yeah.
I thought of Pitt as maybe more of like a 4 kind of win team. But then going through, I was like, no, I can see 6, and I can see more than 6 too. I worry a little bit about the offense finding its footing early on, which I think will make that West Virginia game tough. I think could make the road trip to North Carolina, I believe in the first week of October, coming off of a bye week, a little difficult. I think I agree with you that they could be better by the end, or playing better football at the second half of the season than they do in the first half of the season. So, I feel pretty confident that West Virginia is going to win the backyard brawl. And we'll talk about West Virginia later on, but and at UNC feels tough. But I don't know, at Boston College is probably a toss up on my mind. I think Syracuse at home is probably a toss up on my mind. So if you get one of those, you're looking at 7 wins. You get both of them, you're looking at 8 wins. I think 8 wins are out there. I don't know that I'd go higher than 8, but I think 8 is maybe the ceiling. But even a bowl game does feel attainable for sure.
Yeah. Be curious where they land on quarterback. I think they might end up playing 2 different guys or starting 2 different guys this year as they just try to figure this out. But again, 2 good options. Rather have 2 than none. Let's go to Boston College, our 3rd Northern ACC team, again with a new head coach, just like Syracuse had. I have Boston College at 4-8. You are me. I'm you a little bit at the Fighting Bill O'Briens getting bowl eligible at 6-6, according to Bill Landis. Why?
Yeah, I think because the 2 big kind of toss-up games that I had in my mind were Louisville and Pitt, and I just gave them both, and that's how I got to 6-6. They did not really do themselves any favors with this non-conference schedule, aside from
it's crazy
playing they play at Florida State and at Missouri. They do play Duquesne. Duquesne's a win. I think Western Kentucky's probably a win. I give them a win at
Florida State's a conference game to open the season at Florida State. They also have Michigan State. They played Michigan State and Mizzou in the non-conference. But it's welcome Bill O'Brien. Here are 2 legit Power 5 teams, one of whom is a real playoff contender in your non-conference schedule, and he's looking around saying, "Where's Rhode Island?"
Well, you got Duquesne. You can't get Duquesne and Rhode Island. Although there should be
college should play Rhode Island twice every year.
Just play Rhode Island and pick 2 Ivies, and that can be your non-conference schedule.
Yeah.
Most
Take
years
that, Brown.
When you're Boston College.
Watch out. The Eagles are going to stick it to Princeton. Yeah. Missouri. They got Missouri.
I definitely think that 4-8 is not out of the realm of possibility for me. I think you beat Duquesne and Western Kentucky, and I think you win at Virginia. And then honestly, I can see the rest of the schedule kind of going either way. So I was a little generous, I think, with giving them 3 more wins, and mine were against Michigan State early in the year as Michigan State's trying to figure some stuff out too. And then Louisville and Pitt. And those are all home games. So I'm probably this was one of the teams I'm probably a little hot on this. But I like Thomas Castellanos, and Bill O'Brien seems like a swell guy, and he's from Boston. So maybe that gives him a boost.
Yeah, I mean, this is the upside of the Thomas Castellanos Bill O'Brien association is really high if it hits. And when you have a quarterback like that, and I was there in the spring. They have a couple backs. They have 3 or 4 real receivers. They have a chance with their skill guys to really bother some people. And so if they can just consistently get those guys the ball and not make mistakes. And again, it's just, it can be a rough transition with a first-year coach. But I think there's a couple teams here where the chances for peaks are pretty high, but also the chances for, they're not going to lose to Duquesne, but the chances for lows are there too. So if they could get to 6-6, that's a great season. And they were a bowl team last year with Jeff Hafley. They didn't fire their coach. Jeff Hafley chose to leave. So it's not like this was a program that bottomed out or anything. And again, Jaron Bradley, right? The guy they brought in as a transfer receiver, they're really high on him. Kyle Robichaux in the backfield, legit dudes. So
good offensive line too.
And I sort of schedule gamed myself more. You go through and it's 4-8. But I think in my head of what they have, I think 6-6 is very doable.
What can I ask you? I'm assuming 3 of your wins are Duquesne, Western Kentucky, and Virginia. What's the 4th?
I actually didn't give them the at Virginia. That to me was just just looking for something goofy. Maybe it's a road trip. And then I gave them home wins against UNC and Louisville, right? I leaned. So the wins for me are Duquesne, Western Kentucky, Louisville, and UNC. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of UNC. Yeah. I need that Minnesota UNC game. That I felt that a few times going through this.
No, right. And Mac Brown's all fired up, and we don't care about them, so I don't know about them. So yeah, I don't have a handle on them either, but there's a couple teams that they're going to play up here that we care about. So all right, 4-8 by me, 6-6 by you. Let's go now to the West Coast. We'll go to the team that played in the national championship game last year, got picked in the middle of the pack of the Big Ten. That made some Washington fans not so happy, and we both have them at 6-6. Why do you have Washington at 6-6?
Again, this is another record where I ended up a little higher than I thought I would. And I think maybe that's just some belief in Jedd Fisch and belief in what's left there, that the guys aren't going to like let it totally fall apart. I do feel like 6 is kind of the ceiling. Like I just don't see a world where Washington beats Michigan, Iowa, Penn State, or Oregon this year. And I think going to Rutgers in September is a pretty tough ask. For an early season road trip, even with the injury to Mohamed Touré. So I have that as a loss as well. But then I can see wins in most other games, like Weber State, Eastern Michigan, Washington State in the Apple Cup. It's kind of a different sort of Apple Cup now, with Washington State being like on the periphery of the power conferences. So maybe I too easily chalked that up as a win, but I don't know that I did. And like, I think they can still win Big Ten games against teams like Northwestern, Indiana, UCLA. So that's kind of how I had it. The other loss I had there was USC at home. So I think it's there. I think there's a path to bowl eligibility here. Get like a veteran quarterback who's been through it a little bit, can maybe steady you out when you otherwise wouldn't have it, and some skill right around him, I think, to put together a somewhat compelling offense. And I think a pretty good coaching staff who's sort of had to do this before. So there's a little bit of a blueprint to try to navigate a pretty hard reset. So I'm not expecting the bottom to fall totally out here.
They're going to get introduced to Big Ten defenses pretty quick. I think they're going to start 4-0, non-conference plus a home game against Northwestern. But then it's at Rutgers, Michigan, and at Iowa is like defense. And Will Rogers has been around. He won't be shaken by that. I'm not sure about the offensive line. At Washington, they were so good last year, they basically lost everybody to either the NFL or the portal. And I think there's going to be some harsh realities. And, you throw in Penn State later in the season, they have to end with Oregon. I just think it will be a little bit of an adjustment from style of play, from everything they lost. I think, again, you could argue that no team had ever lost as much in one offseason as Washington did when your head coach goes to Alabama. Their great recruiting guy, Courtney Morgan, just got basically almost $1 million at Alabama to like stay there. He had followed Kalen DeBoer there. Plus, you lose all the guys to the NFL, 10 plus draft picks, and then all the guys you lost in the portal. Their starting center, who should still be there, is the starting center at Alabama. So I think 6-6 is a victory, and the schedule's hard.
It is.
They
hard.
play like the 4 best Big Ten teams. Almost. They don't play Ohio State, but to play Michigan, at Iowa, at Penn State, at Oregon, and throw in USC, that's 5 Big Ten bangers, man.
Yeah, they did not get a friendly welcome to the league draw.
No,
from the Big Ten.
No, I'm intrigued by a home game with Michigan, the team that just beat you in the national championship game, and it's a hard reset for everybody. And who knows what may have happened or not happened with Michigan by then in terms of any NCAA stuff hanging over them. For Washington to get the Wolverines in their place, that was one of those, as I look for upsets, I thought about that. I didn't go all the way and take that, but if Washington, Jedd Fisch is a good coach. If they're a little better than you expect, and they're not overwhelmed by good defenses, that's one that I'll have in the back of my mind. Could they surprise the Wolverines there?
Yeah, I thought that too. And we're going to talk about Michigan a little later on in the show, but I will say that Michigan doesn't play a road game until October, when it has to fly across the country to play at Washington. It is the 6th of 6 consecutive games, and your first one on the road. Like, not an easy trip. I don't think. No. I could see it.
Yeah. All right. Both 6-6 with Washington. Let's go right down the road to Oregon. And I'm super curious where you are. I think I am a little bit going to be on an island here. I have Oregon at 10-2. You have Oregon at 11-1.
I have Oregon at 11-1, but I'm worried about some stuff.
So what are you worried about?
obviously Ohio State, which I have actually in my projections here. Spoiler, I have Oregon winning that game at home.
So do I. I have Oregon 10-2 beating Ohio State.
Two things. There's more than two things, but two things really jumped out at me. The first is after playing Ohio State, having to fly to Purdue on a Friday night. That I don't love that. We know what Purdue does. We know what Purdue does to good teams in the Big Ten. And that to me feels like maybe Oregon staring down the barrel of a Boilermaker situation. And then the other thing on the schedule that jumped out to me was they play 8 games in a row without any kind of let up. And the last of those games is a road trip to Madison against Wisconsin, where I could see them getting tripped up as well. So I'm not going to predict a loss to Purdue at Purdue. I think that could get a little uncomfortable maybe, but I don't think that's a loss. But I could see Wisconsin beating Oregon at home after a stretch that Oregon's going to play through up until that game. And I think Wisconsin is also coming off a bye that week too.
They don't leave the West Coast for their first 6 games because their first 2 road games are Oregon State and UCLA, and they have 4 home games in their first 6. And then, as you said, it's at Purdue home, at Michigan home, at Wisconsin. And that's a tough, that's the new reality. But that is a lot to ask. And I think Wisconsin is going to play a huge role in who winds up in the Big Ten title game because Wisconsin gets Oregon and Penn State in Camp Randall. And if they win one of those games, I think that has the chance to be the differentiator of whoever wins in Madison of those 2 teams goes to the Big Ten championship. And if you lose in Madison, you're not going to the Big Ten championship. So this is almost nothing about how good Oregon is.
Mm-hmm.
They have great tackles. They have real skill guys. They have a veteran winning quarterback. They have defensive playmakers. But this is circumstance. And to me, I have 10-2 Oregon being a problem in the playoff. So like that. So this is for Oregon fans, like this is all fine, but it is a reminder of the realities of what it's going to be like to be a West Coast team in the Big Ten. And the first year of getting acclimated to that. And this is nothing. I think this is nothing, but you look for stuff. I double checked it. I think this is right. I think Dillon Gabriel in his 2 years at Oklahoma was 6-6 on the road. Now, that included a hard reset in 2 years ago at Oklahoma in the first year of Brent Venables when Oklahoma wasn't any good. And like, that's not Dillon Gabriel's fault. They weren't out there scoring 3 points a game or anything. But I'm just saying, like, Oregon's never done this. They've to be in Indiana, Michigan, and Wisconsin 3 times in 5 weeks is a new world. And it might show up on the football field. And so you and I are both there. You didn't quite go as far as I did, but I think our thought process is the same. This is a good football team with some tough circumstances potentially.
So are your losses Michigan and Wisconsin?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I wanted like I kind of did a little bit of like a round robin thing, I think, with some of the higher tier teams in the Big Ten. So I didn't have Michigan winning that game at home against Oregon, but it's certainly on the table. Did you pause at all on Boise State?
I didn't. I mean, what they have? What is it? What's his name? Ashton Gentry. He's like one of the best.
Gentry. Yeah, he's
one of the best running backs in the country.
Yeah. Trendy G5 playoff pick. Right. I think for some people who don't want to pick Liberty. Right.
Week 2. That's a blow up the bracket kind of game there potentially. Again, Oregon would have time to rebound from that. But if we're talking about that, we are talking about an Oregon season that people are not expecting. If we're talking about like they might lose to Boise State, they might lose to Wisconsin, I'm sure there are people in Eugene who are like, what are you talking about? This is insane. Oregon's going to win the national championship. And this is one of these things like both could be true. Mm-hmm. Right? They could be 10-2 with losses to Boise State and Wisconsin and win the national championship. So it's just trying to get through a slog, man.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to lose to Boise State, but there are enough transfer pieces that have to kind of settle into this thing that if anyone is going to test them before they play Ohio State, I think it would be Boise. But to your point, I'm not on upset alert there yet or nearly there.
All right, 10-2 for me, 11-1 for Bill. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to start running through the old Big Ten West teams. We'll do that next on Kings of the North. Running through all of our Northern record predictions here on Kings of the North. And by the way, as a reminder, again, we will be going live starting Monday at noon on YouTube, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from noon to 1:30. Betting the North with Tyler Shoemaker in your feed every Friday morning at 5 a.m. A live post-game show on Saturdays from 11 p.m. till midnight Eastern. And then we might I'm probably going to drop a couple of little things, mini hits a couple mornings a week. But the thrust of this, live Monday through Thursday, live on Saturday night, 5 live shows a week. We have not done it. We've been working on stuff. You may have noticed we bought banners.
It's got banners.
A lot of banners. So here's the thing. If you're wondering about the banners, I bought them for all of our Northern teams. And I will say there was one that for some reason wasn't available. So I don't have a BYU banner. So I have to acquire a BYU banner. But I have 27 banners, but I only have 14 spots on my wall. So they're Velcroed up there, and I'm going to rotate the banners. So every show will be a new collection of banners. Sometimes it'll be random. Sometimes it might mean something. Maybe it'll be a ranking. Maybe it'll be teams who are playing each other that week, hanging out on the wall together. But and then we got the dog mentality hat, just in case. So I have easy access whenever I'm feeling a dog mentality coming on. Right? It's like, oh, what is that? It's dog. Dog mentality is right here within arm's reach. So we're excited. We've been building up to this, and we're just grateful for everybody who's been along for the ride so far and everybody who's going to join us in the new venture. All right, let's do Nebraska. Officially naming Dylan Raiola the true freshman, the starting quarterback this week, to no one's surprise. Oh, hater.
9-3.
9-3. I got 9-3 for the Cornhuskers. You have 7-5. They just want to get to a bowl. They take your 7-5. With a true freshman and a team that hasn't gone to a bowl since 2016, they would take your 7-5. But I'm going to be the grand marshal of the parade when they go 9-3. You're surprised by my 9-3?
I'm a little surprised by the 9-3 because I think the back half of this schedule is pretty tough. Like once you get to that Ohio State game, I think we talked about this. Like I could see a situation where they're only winning one of those games starting from the end of October through the end of the season when you have at Ohio State, UCLA, an off week at USC, Wisconsin, and at Iowa to close the season. So this feels to me like a start off really hot, kind of peter out at the end. And I also have Rutgers springing an upset in Lincoln before Nebraska's first bye week. On October 5th, Rutgers goes there. And I think Nebraska's going to start pretty hot. I think Nebraska's going to beat Colorado, and they're going to be undefeated. And I could see Rutgers bringing a real defense to Lincoln and kind of showing Nebraska that maybe it's feeling itself a little too much and winning a game there. That's a toss up for me. And it's in Lincoln, so obviously Nebraska can win that game. Nebraska wins at it. Like 8-5 is definitely on the table. I just don't know that I see like a major kind of upset, which I would characterize like beating Ohio State, but even I think beating Wisconsin, Iowa, USC, I think would be upsets at this point.
So my 3 losses are at Ohio State, at USC, and then I hate the concept of trap games, except sometimes you see them. And it's like, I actually have them losing to the Fighting Curt Cignettis at Indiana the week before Ohio State. That like, hey, we're headed towards an undefeated Nebraska-Ohio State showdown. And Curt Cignetti's like, nope. So we'll get to Wisconsin soon. It really depends what you think of Wisconsin. Nebraska, in my mind, Nebraska beating Wisconsin in Lincoln is not an upset. So it might be a 50-50 game, but I don't know.
If that game's played tomorrow, is Nebraska definitely favored? There might be a line for that actually.
I mean, we'll know. I mean, this again. We want to get to the games to learn stuff. We want to learn how good Dylan Raiola is going to be as a freshman, and we want to learn what Tyler Van Dyke, the transfer from Miami, is going to be like as the Wisconsin quarterback. So I don't know. They're both in year 2. They both learned a lot, I think, from last year. Luke Fickell at Wisconsin and Matt Rule at Nebraska. It's like who jumps more. I I think it's probably like a 3-point game either way, but I don't look at that and think like, oh, what a great win for Nebraska at home against Wisconsin. I think at Iowa, I have them winning at Iowa at the end of the year. And I had talked at one point talking about throwing offseason stuff back in people's faces. Like, could Nebraska be 10-1 versus 10-1 on Black Friday in the last game of the year? I'm not quite to that point, but I think they'll both be really good, and that'll be a moderately huge game. So I actually do have Nebraska winning that one to get to 9-3. I think we're probably not that far apart. Like, lose at Ohio State, lose at USC, be on the lookout for an upset somewhere else. I feel like we're just right. Our difference is you have them losing to Wisconsin and Iowa at the end of the year. I have them beating Wisconsin and Iowa at the end of the year, and that's where we're 2 games apart.
Yeah, and like Nebraska's got a really good defense, and by the end of the year, Dylan Raiola could be like the real deal, right? I don't want to be dismissive of that, but right now, as I try to project it, like I just think of a freshman QB going and have to play some of those teams, having to go play those defenses in particular, and I could see that not being a great day. It's the same calculus that I have with Rutgers. It's like, all right, like Dylan Raiola, you're the man, but are you actually ready for the best of what the Big Ten can throw at you defensively? I'm not sure on that yet.
All right. 9-3 for me, 7-5 for Bill. Let's go to Minnesota. I've felt kind of through the offseason and just like looking at the over-unders and stuff when we were doing stuff in May and June that people were underestimating Minnesota. This is a team that has traditionally had a very high floor under PJ Fleck. They were 5-7, but got to a bowl game a year ago because they're good in the classroom. You have them 5-7. I have them 7-5. Why are you colder on the Gophers than I am?
There's some stuff early in the year, like Darius Taylor is hurt right now. Daniel Jackson's hurt right now. I don't know if either of them, both of them, none of them are going to be available for the game against UNC. So, like in my head right now, that's a loss. The season opening game to UNC in Minneapolis on next Thursday night. So that kind of removes them out of a bowl eligibility for me. And then if they're still dealing with any kind of injury stuff, the 2 very important players, their 2 best offensive players, at least skill guys, they have to play Iowa and Michigan in September as well. It just feels to me like Minnesota might come out of September like kind of beat up. And then I don't know what that portends for the rest of the season. So I'm a little worried about that. If you're going to tell me that they're going to beat UNC, then yeah, I have them losing at Rutgers. I have Penn State and Wisconsin beating them. Like, it's a pretty tough schedule. I think there are some very obvious wins. Rhode Island, Nevada, I think at UCLA is an obvious win. I gave them wins at Maryland and Illinois, but I don't have them winning the opener. I don't have them beating Iowa. I don't have them beating Michigan. I think USC, Rutgers, Penn State, and Wisconsin all get them. So I don't see an easy path to bowl eligibility. I see a path, but I don't think it's like, yeah, this can definitely happen.
Definitely a get healthy stretch in the middle of the year. At UCLA, off week, Maryland, at Illinois. So I also have them winning those 3 games. Guess they have injury issues, but also when those guys are healthy, when Darius Taylor and Daniel Jackson are healthy, again, they didn't make our list of like the best skill groups in the Big Ten, but those are 2 like real stars. And Max Brosmer, I think, just has a chance. I think they have a chance to make a leap. And it's one of these things, again, it's like Ethan Kaliak-Manis is going to make Rutgers better, but not having Ethan Kaliak-Manis is going to make Minnesota better. And I think both those things might be true. And if they can throw the ball more effectively, and they might chuck it a lot, I just think they have a chance to be a tough out. And so your injury concerns are taken. I have them winning against North Carolina, and then I think that propels them a little bit. Again, you look and we're 2 games apart. When we talk it out, we're actually not that far apart. I do have them upsetting USC at home, which is, again, USC coming to Minnesota. It's not going to be 2 degrees or anything in October, but just like USC will probably come in thinking like, oh, yeah, whatever. And then they'll just row the boat all over them. Right. So
that's a tough stretch for like USC goes LSU, then Utah State, then they're off, then at Michigan, Wisconsin, at Minnesota. Like, that's talking about a team.
Welcome to the Big Ten. Welcome to the Big Ten. Right. And PJ Fleck's waiting with an oar right at the end, right across the face. Lincoln Riley, take that. So
yeah, I definitely think Minnesota is capable of springing those kind of upsets.
Yeah.
So if it's going to happen once or twice, then 7-5 is definitely out there.
All right, Wisconsin is next. I'm very curious where you are here because I think Wisconsin might have a good team and not that great of a record. I am at 7-5. You are at 8-4. They have some tough games here. And as I said, they I think have a chance to help decide the Big Ten, getting Penn State and Oregon at home. But they're at Nebraska, they're at Iowa, they're at Rutgers, they're at USC, and also obviously they have Bama in week 3. So 7-5, more a result of the schedule than I think the progress of their program. Why are you at 8-4?
I have them upsetting Iowa. Maybe that's a difference for between you and I. That's a tough stretch that they get into there, that part of the schedule. They play Penn State and Iowa back to back, but it's part of a string of 5 games in a row without a break, and there's 3 road games in there. One's at USC, one's at Rutgers, and one's at Northwestern's weird stadium. I actually we'll talk about Northwestern. I won't get to that. We'll do them next. I just think they're gonna beat Iowa. Like I don't think Iowa's gonna like run roughshod over everybody. Like from the old Big Ten West kind of thing. I have Wisconsin winning at USC as well. I don't think they're going to beat Penn State. I don't think they're going to beat Oregon. I have them losing to Alabama. I'm actually curious. Does that 7-5 include a win against Alabama? Or is it a loss?
No, but it includes a win against Oregon.
Okay.
So that's like my theory of the case. My plan is to be in Madison for that game. Talk to me Friday night. If I'm drowning in cheese and I'm trying to set up a Cram It Bama tailgate in Madison. If anybody wants to help me do that, I'm trying to figure out, would it be the Cram It Bama tailgate or would it just be the Cramma tailgate?
Yeah, I like Cramma.
Yeah, I might make Cramma shirts and hand them out to Wisconsin fans and see if we can get one on TV. Do you think that would Fox show that? Cramma. It might have to be Cram It Bama Kings of the North. We could get that on TV. We could get that on TV.
Yeah. Joel Klatt.
I'll be handing out free shirts. So I'd love to get all the way there with the Wisconsin win over Bama. And again, let's see what the first 2 weeks look like. Western Michigan and South Dakota. We're close here. 7-5, 8-4. But it is a tough schedule, right? I mean, I've talked to Wisconsin people who are like, they know it's a tough schedule. Doesn't mean they can't be good. But do you think the Phil Longo offense will be better in year 2?
I think it'll be a little better. Yeah. I'm not like the biggest Tyler Van Dyke fan in the world, which I think I've said that before, but he's a veteran guy. Like I think he'll run that offense fairly well. I think they've done a nice job trying to put some better skill around him. I think their offensive line could actually be pretty good. Their tackles are quite good. Maybe the middle of that offensive line is a little more of a question. And I think their defense is going to be awesome. Like I probably won't have many questions about the defense as long as Luke Fickell's there, but I think this is shaping up to be like a top 15 defense nationally. So I think that'll make them a tough out most weeks. But my path here also includes like maybe surprising some people by like winning at Iowa and winning at USC, but then I also have them losing at Northwestern. Like so, I think there's some volatility there.
All right, let's talk about Northwestern now. Northwestern playing in their temporary stadium on the lake in Evanston, playing a couple games in Wrigley Field with their old stadium torn down, the new stadium under construction. It'll open in 2026. We both have them at 6-6. And I had that Wisconsin game as a win for Northwestern. I think they have a chance to get somebody in their goofy, tiny stadium. So I think it has a chance to be a home field advantage for Northwestern this year.
I gave them wins in all their home games in their goofy, tiny stadium.
Okay.
Including Wisconsin and Duke. Yeah.
I am in that range. I actually backed off of it from where I was initially to get me to 6-6 on Northwestern. Part of it is they brought in Mike Wright, the transfer from Vanderbilt. That's still a quarterback competition as far as we know at the moment with Jack Lausch. I think there's some questions on the offensive line. Their defense will be pretty good. David Braun, the head coach who initially was brought in as a defensive coordinator, now he called the defense last year. They have a defensive coordinator this year. And then Zach Lujan, the 29-year-old offensive coordinator. I think, again, like I'm excited to see what Cade Bell does at Pitt. I'm excited to see what Zach Lujan does at Northwestern. But I think I have real, at least curiosities about quarterback and offensive line. And so I didn't want to get out over my skis too much, but I do think They'll play, I think, Miami of Ohio, Duke, Eastern Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin in the Lakefront mini 15,000 seat stadium. They'll play Ohio State and Illinois in Wrigley Field. So if you have been winning all those home games, you just don't think they're going to win a road game anywhere?
I do not have them winning. I have them winning at Purdue.
Okay.
I have them losing both games in Wrigley.
Okay. Yeah. I have some thoughts about Illinois. So I actually had them. We're at 6-6. I think we probably have half the games different though on how they get to 6-6, right? Because I do have them beating Illinois. I have them winning at Purdue. I have them winning at Maryland, but I didn't quite get there. I pulled back and have them losing at home. As much as I think it's going to be a fun atmosphere in the mini stadium, I do have them losing to Duke and Wisconsin at home. So
I do think I think this offensive line is potentially so bad that this season really gets away from Northwestern. Like that does scare me a little bit.
I think they have a chance to be incredibly inconsistent and have games where they look awful and have everybody give up on them and then they beat somebody. Mm-hmm. So I think that's out there. I think David Braun might be pretty good at this.
If he starts with back-to-back bowl seasons.
So
not bad.
There's a little bit of a belief in him sort of finding a way, but they really need to get that quarterback situation settled long term. They've been kind of grasping at straws, looking in the portal the last couple of years for stuff. So they did, and Brendan Sullivan, the guy who started some games last year for them, might start games at Iowa this year. So like they really need to get quarterback and offensive line settled. They have a new offensive line coach, so I think there's some transition there that I think will show itself. But I don't know that Braun would let it get away from him. That's part of it too, that I think they could hit a rough stretch. It didn't get away from him last year when there was every reason in the world. I think people last year at this time were looking at Northwestern going 2-10, and they had a winning record and beat Utah in a bowl game. So it's like that was a fantastic year for them last year.
And Zach Lujan can probably scheme around some of those deficiencies, right? He's a little bit of a mad scientist reputation for such a young guy.
Yeah. All right. So let's get to Illinois. The rivalry game with Northwestern at the end of the year. This is a team that I am pretty far out on, and I even pulled myself back from being more out on them. We're similar here. You're 4-8 for Illinois. I'm 3-9. When I originally did this for our Big Ten predictions, I had them losing every single Big Ten game. I wound up giving them a win in the Big Ten. Part of it is schedule. Their road games are Nebraska, Penn State, Oregon, and Rutgers. That's not easy.
Yeah.
And I think there's some uncertainty with the quarterback situation. I don't know that Luke Altmaier has had a great preseason. I think there's some depth issues, maybe defensively. This is a team that I think it could get away from them. I think Brett Bielema has been a good coach, but this to me is a little bit, maybe they struggle early. Maybe they try a quarterback change and that doesn't work. And all of a sudden, before you know it, Illinois has had a nightmare year.
I can definitely get away from. I agree with that because they play Kansas in the non-conference. So
yes,
I think you can only really count on 2 non-conference wins with Eastern Illinois and Central Michigan. And then I don't think you could convince me that there are 4 Big Ten wins out there for them that's going to get them to bowl eligibility. I gave them wins against Michigan State and at Northwestern, and I did not feel great about either one of them. I think Minnesota is maybe a similar kind of toss-up game. Purdue is a similar kind of toss-up game, but I think they are that. I think they are definitely the bottom of the Big Ten. I think is going to be pretty competitive in a way that it could get a little chaotic. So who emerges from that I think will be interesting, but I don't have a ton of belief that it's going to be Illinois. I felt generous giving them 2 Big Ten wins.
Yeah, they have their 100th anniversary Red Grange game where they're going to wear the helmets that look like leather helmets against Michigan in the middle of the year. And then they're at Oregon the next week. I mean, who plays Michigan and Oregon back to back? This is the reality of the new Big Ten. So I just think it's a tough spot for them and maybe a little bit of a reset year. Yeah. All right. Purdue. This is the team that every poll, our KOTN poll, every other poll picked Purdue to finish last of 18 Big Ten teams. I do not think Purdue is going to finish last. I have them at 5-7. You have them at 3-9. I think they have a chance to be significantly more competitive than people are anticipating in year 2 under Ryan Walters, in year 2 of Hudson Card as a starting quarterback, 45 new players between freshmen and the portal. Ryan Walters did not sit on his hands. I think there's a chance for some of that talent to help them immediately. And I think they just will be more competitive than people are giving them credit for. But like even 3-9, is that like a 3-9, or is it like a, hey, tough schedule, getting somewhere, competitive 3-9 in your mind?
I think it's a 3-9 where Purdue is really annoying.
Okay.
to Notre Dame, to Wisconsin, to Oregon, maybe even to Ohio State, to Penn State, like teams that are going to be playing for something that have to go play Purdue. This is a really tough schedule. But I could see that being a little bit of a thorn in the side. It is hard for me to embrace really any team that has so much new. And there's a lot of new here, and they weren't that good last year. But if you're saying Hudson Card is going to take a step, and like Devin Mockaby's a really good running back, I actually think their offensive line is probably not as bad as you would think it is. It's better than Northwestern's offensive line. If the defense is going to take a leap, which kind of feels like the key to all of this, if like the Ryan Walters defensive system with some new faces, with some necessary sort of impact transfers, like if all of that comes together, then I could see them pushing for a bowl game. Then I could see them, beating Northwestern, beating Michigan State, beating Indiana. I think you're talking about a team that's at 6 wins, I think. I just don't know that it's all going to come together. So I landed at 3-9 with only one Big Ten win, and that was at Illinois.
They might wind up playing 4 playoff teams. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State. So again, that's life in the new Big Ten. 5-7 for me, 3-9 for you. We'll wrap up with Iowa. I have pulled back slightly here, and you can see it reflected here. I wound up at 9-3. You are at 10-2, and there certainly was a time when I was at 10-2 with Iowa, but I'm not at the moment. Why are you still there?
Oh, I need to know why you're not there. I'm shocked.
So I again, acknowledging the fact that Michigan dealt with all its coaching upheaval and suspension upheaval last year and was fine. The Kirk Ferentz week 1 suspension has turned the Cyhawk game into a loss for me, for Iowa. So he'll be back, but I think Iowa State's going to be good. And it's just the combination of that and the quarterback uncertainty, that the quarterback play has not been great. Maybe Cade McNamara is playing a little better at the end of camp here, but that's not settled in the way that I thought it might be by the start of the season. That if you were talking in spring, it's like, all right, Cade McNamara will be back for the start of the year. He'll be healthy. He's been a playoff quarterback. They'll be ready to roll. I don't think that's where they are with their quarterback. And now your leader is out for the first week. So that might be it. Because then I just have the loss at Ohio State, which I think everybody pretty much would agree on. Mm-hmm. And then I just think, I don't know that they're going to win everything else. So I actually have them losing the last week of the season to Nebraska. So at home, which is tough, but there's good wins in there. They're beating Washington, they're beating Wisconsin, but it's not that tough of a schedule. I don't know if I should if it flips a game that Kirk Ferentz is suspended the week before, but it just feels like Iowa's a little bit more in flux to start the season than I expected them to be, and that probably cost them a win in my mind.
I'm a little surprised to hear that. My mind did not go immediately to the Iowa State game when I saw that Kirk Ferentz was suspended. So I still have that as a win for Iowa, and I don't disagree with anything you said about quarterback uncertainty. I just watched the season where Iowa won 10 games and it didn't matter that they whatever Cade McNamara is, he will be better than what they had last year. I think I feel pretty confident in that. And I think they'll have a better offensive plan than they had last year. Even if the offense is merely the 100th best offense in the country, that would represent significant improvement. I think for Iowa, that's kind of what I think they're going to be offensively. And the defense is awesome. I just I don't know that there are a whole lot of teams on this schedule that can muster what it's going to take to put enough points on this defense to beat Iowa. Some will. I think Ohio State definitely can. I do have Wisconsin beating Iowa. I don't know that I gave much of a second thought to any other game. Like Iowa State, yes, Iowa State's a rivalry. I think that game will be close, but I have Iowa winning. I think Nebraska at the end of the year is potentially tricky, but I gave Iowa both those games, but it's very possible that maybe I'm not taking into account enough the suspension of Kirk Ferentz or some of the uncertainty they seem to still have on the offensive side. I have a lot of faith in the defense, which I think they've earned. And I just kind of think that's going to be like a typical sort of how is Iowa 10-2 kind of season. But at the end of the day, you're going to look up, they're still 10-2.
Is this 10-2 at the edge of the playoff race then, in your mind? Not that we're making playoff picks on this show? I
think so, because you got to, if you're talking like just like resume and like good wins, there's not there, and like in my the way I laid it out, the best wins probably Iowa State, and then I guess you're hoping that Nebraska's ranked, and that's a good one for you too. But you're maybe talking about 1-2 good wins.
All right, 9-3. I chickened out a little bit. I chickened out. And it's probably like Kirk Ferentz will be suspended for the first game. They'll all wear shirts that say "We love Kirk," and then they'll come out and boat race Iowa State because they're mad that he got suspended for a game. So that probably is as likely as them being like, "Oh no, our coach was suspended last week, and we're still thinking about it, even though he's back." I'm not sure my rationale makes any sense there. I do like Iowa State, and when we come back, we will start with the Northern Big 12 teams, starting with the Cyclones. 28 teams, 2 men, 56 predictions here on Kings of the North. Turning now to Northern Big 12 teams for our record predictions. We will finish up with the former Big 10 East teams. They'll be the last segment, but we'll start with Iowa State here with our 8 Big 12 teams. We just talked about Iowa, 8-4 for both of us. And last week on our betting show with Tyler Shoemaker, and again, I would direct anybody to catch that show on Friday mornings. I had a crazy Cyclone Hawkeye bet of betting both Iowa State and Iowa to win 9 games or more, not as a parlay, but separately. I think they were both like plus 230 or plus 210. So if just one of the two happens, you win. You win like a nice a little bit of change. And if they somehow both happen, so we're in range here. And I'm interested that I have them 8-4 beating Iowa. You have Iowa State 8-4 losing to Iowa. So what are you thinking about this Cyclone season?
4 really hard road games at Iowa, at West Virginia, at Kansas, at Utah. And I don't think they're going to lose all of those games, but I could see them losing all of those games. Those aren't my 4 losses. I have them beating Utah at the end of the year.
You have them beating Utah. Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Like I think we're going to see that in the Big 12. Like I have a couple games where, like I have some pretty lofty records here for a couple of Big 12 teams, but losing to teams like Iowa State or West Virginia that I think might not match up record wise, where they're going to be just as competitive. Like someone has to lose these games, right? So I have Iowa State at 8-4, and we'll get to West Virginia in a bit. But yeah, I have them beating Utah at the end of the year. But I think they're going to lose the Cyhawk game. I have them losing at West Virginia. I threw a Texas Tech home loss in there. Again, I think the Big 12 will be a little difficult to predict week to week. So I think we're going to see some surprises. I don't know if that qualifies as a surprise or not. Texas Tech is not a bad team. But I have that as a loss for Iowa State. And I have them losing at Kansas as well. So I think you could just pick like the 4 hard road games as your 4 losses and kind of leave it at that. I mixed it up a little bit, but 7-8 wins feels, probably like a fair expectation for this team given the schedule.
So you haven't beaten Kansas State and Farmageddon at home to end the year.
I do. Yeah.
Okay. That'd be a heck of a win too. Mm-hmm. I mean, they play the 2 preseason favorites in the Big 12 are Utah and Kansas State. Those are the 2 teams that Iowa State finishes with. Iowa State absolutely will have a hand in shaping who makes the Big 12 title game. And it could be Iowa State trying to get there itself. But at the very least, if those last 2 games, if they win one and lose one, I mean, the team that they knock off there, they might be knocking them out of the Big 12 title game. So I have them 5-0 going to West Virginia, since I haven't beaten Iowa early in the year, which would be like, let's go. How can we both not be there? We might just have to move to Morgantown. West Virginia's home schedule is so hot this year. We'll get to them. But Iowa State at West Virginia, maybe with if they're both undefeated, come on. Are you serious?
Both undefeated with some juice too, if that's the case, because you're talking about West Virginia undefeated with a win against Penn State and Iowa State undefeated with a win against Iowa.
We just speak it into existence, man. So, but their schedule is tough enough that 8-4 is a really good year.
Yes.
In a really deep, tough conference and with a really good non-conference game on the schedule. That is legit because you talked about the 4 the 4 tough road games and then throw in Kansas State at home. That's 5 real bangers. And so you win everything else and win at least one of those. I think they would be, Iowa State fans should be happy and proud with that. Would be an exciting 8-4 year. If somehow we're talking 10-2, then Matt Campbell has done an excellent job.
Okay. Yeah. If we're talking 10-2, they're going to change the name of Ames and name it after Matt Campbell.
Yeah. Matt. Welcome to Matt,
Iowa. To Matt, Iowa. Yeah.
I'd live in Matt. All right, let's do Colorado. I'm very curious where you land here. There's a lot of people who are like, I think they're going to stink. And some people thinking like, I think they'll be better than you think. We are divided here. I'm 5-7 on Colorado. You are 7-5. One of the things I have, and I checked this line the other day, I think it's 9.5 against North Dakota State in the opener on Thursday. I have them losing that game. I think they are going to come out of the gate losing to North Dakota State, losing to Nebraska, and then righting the ship a little bit. I don't think the season will completely get away from them, but then they're into the meat of a tough Big 12 schedule, and they're just going to fall short of bowl eligibility. So 5-7 for me. You have them beating North Dakota State to get to 7-5?
I do, but I don't feel great about it. I did give. I think because that's going to be, I think, such a trendy upset pick that I just kind of went against it. But North Dakota State beats FBS teams.
All the time.
They haven't lost the one since 2010. They've won 6 in a row. I think it's what it is, 6 in a row. They're number 2 in the FCS
6 in a row. I think they lost like 2 years ago to somebody, but they had a 6-game.
They lost to. They did lose one a couple years ago, but they have won
by a touchdown by one score,
and they have won 6 FBS games since 2010.
Yes,
they're really good. They're number 2 in the FCS poll. They could very well be the national champion. It is among the more difficult opening games anyone we talk about plays.
Yep. And Dion knows it.
And Dion knows it. Dion, I think, is upset that
yes.
they're playing that game, and I don't necessarily blame him. I have them winning that game, but they could also start 0-3, right? Like
Colorado State in week 3 after the Nebraska trip.
The game that was an absolute banger last year that was not a runaway for Colorado. That's going to be a show, I think, with all the energy and emotion that's going to go into that game, more so than typically does. And it's already pretty heightened. There's a world where Colorado starts 0-3. So like I did not feel great about this 7-5, but
that is wild. They're playing in the Big 12, which again, we keep saying how good we think the Big 12 is going to be. And their 3 non-conference games are the number 2 team in the FCS at home, and then road games, back-to-back non-conference road games. How often does that happen to any Power 5 team at Nebraska and at Colorado State? Like they could have, I mean, if Colorado, they could use it probably, right? Mm-hmm. Three gimme games. We'll give you $1.2 million. Come in so we can beat you, so we can be 3-0 by the time we get to the meat grinder of the Big 12. Instead, you're talking about 0-3. This is real.
But does that sound crazy to you? Like 0-3? You think it could happen?
No. Like we think the offensive line is going to be better. It's completely rebuilt.
Yeah.
They have we think the defense will be better. It's a new defensive coordinator, right? They just like everything's new and they don't have a give me in the first 3 weeks. So, and then by the time they get it figured out, they're playing Kansas State and Arizona and Utah and Kansas and Oklahoma State. It's like, okay, good luck getting to a bowl.
They have one gimme, I think. And like it's Baylor. I even hesitate to call Baylor a gimme because it's at least a conference game.
Yeah.
Like at UCF it's not an automatic win either. Like they're going to have to Colorado is going to have to play really good football out of the chute.
Yeah.
I kind of think they will. Which is why I picked them to beat North Dakota State. I think they will lose to Nebraska, but I'm anticipating that being an awesome game. I think they'll beat Colorado State, and I think they'll beat Baylor. I could like UCF is a pretty good team, or potentially a tricky team, especially for like a rework defense. UCF might be able to run the ball on Colorado, but I think Colorado will start well, not start undefeated, but start well, which gets them to 7-5. But I don't even think they have to be playing all that poorly for the beginning of the season to be pretty rough for them because they're playing some good teams. And
we'll just have to be on the lookout for this. They could be a much improved team and not have their record improve much. Yep. Which again, there will be knives out for Deion Sanders and that Colorado team. And a lot of it, they have done it to themselves But if they start 0-3, you just explained why it could happen, and it won't necessarily mean that Deion Sanders doesn't know how to run a program, but they're going to get blasted. People are going to be waiting for them to fail, and they could be improved in all the ways we think they're improved and be 4-8 or 5-7. So
yeah, definitely.
Just a reality. All right, let's do BYU. I am 5-7 for BYU. You are 4-8. They have not named a starting quarterback as we record this. And I think a lot of this is the continued discussion of like BYU just making this leap to the Big 12. It's tough. It's a lot to ask. So I have them winning their last 2 games of the year at Arizona State and home against Houston, which means I think they have a really tough stretch staring them down in the middle of the year. Arizona, Oklahoma State, at UCF, at Utah, Kansas. I have 5 straight losses there for BYU. So I just think it's going to be hard. Somebody's got to lose games in a conference this good. So 5-7 and 4-8.
Yeah, I think I have them losing at SMU, at Wyoming, and to Kansas State in September. I think they're coming out of the first month of the season at best 2-3, and I could see 1-4 if Baylor beats them. So I'm not a tremendous fan of like where BYU is right now. That's what you said. It's this questions about being able to maintain a competitiveness in the Big 12. I have them winning 3 Big 12 games. I do have them beating Baylor. I have them beating Arizona State and Houston, but I don't have them winning anything else, and I have them losing to a good G5 team, I think, in Wyoming.
All right, 5-7 and 4-8. Let's move on to their neighbor down the road, the Utah Utes. I'm very curious where you have them. Okay. I'm at 11-1 with Utah. You're at 10-2.
Yep.
They do not play Kansas State in the regular season. They have one tough road game. Everything else, every other road game, you look and you think, they should win that. Mm-hmm. So you can look at this schedule and see 12-0. I think you can. And so I'm a little curious of where you see 2 losses for Utah.
I have the losses actually at home to Arizona at the end of September. I think Arizona is a good team. I wonder. I don't know how Utah is going to start, and by the end of September, you should kind of start to have your feet under you anyway. But I think Cam Rising hasn't played in a while. There's some enough turnover on both sides of the ball. They're going to have to be figuring some stuff out. And will Southern Utah, Baylor, and Utah State test that? No, but I think at Oklahoma State will, and I think Arizona will before Utah is off. I do have them winning at Oklahoma State, which I think is actually a very tough road game. Okay. I have them losing to Arizona, and I have them losing, as I said before, to Iowa State. I have Utah and Kansas State as like the teams playing in the Big 12 championship, but both of them losing to Iowa State.
Wow. Okay. I have their loss at Oklahoma State. And that was almost, I had made a prediction on one of our other outrageous prediction shows that nobody in major college football will go undefeated. I think maybe Utah has the best chance to do it because as much as we're talking about how tough the Big 12 is, they don't play Kansas State or Kansas or West Virginia. So they miss the other 2 favorites and our lovable, crazy, reckless wild card dark horse in West Virginia. So you really, and if Cam Rising is ready to go, and it feels like just reading everything out of camp, I mean, I think they're locked in. I think they feel good about their whole 2 deep. I think they are loaded and ready to go. So I think if anybody goes undefeated, it's Utah. But I almost made myself find a loss where I don't know that I actually think there is one, but it's hard to go 12-0.
I think that closing stretch at Colorado, back home against Iowa State, and then having to go to Florida in the last week of the season to play UCF on a Friday night, that's a pretty tough stretch. I have them losing the Iowa State game. I could see a loss in any of those 3 games.
Okay.
I'm not picking it clearly. I'm at 10-2, but it's not the toughest schedule I've seen. They definitely avoid the big dogs that you laid out there, but That's a tough close in my mind. I like that close for me is like, oh, they're going to drop 2 of these games kind of situation. I didn't pick it, but I thought about it.
Okay. 11-1 for me, 10-2 for you. Let's go to Cincinnati. I don't know if I'm just soft-hearted, but having gone to a Cincinnati practice, I came away from the Cincinnati practice feeling better about Cincinnati than I did going in. I think they really believe in Brendan Sorsby at quarterback. I think you like Brendan Sorsby. They think Joe Royer at tight end is going to have a breakout year. I think they have some other guys. I think their receivers are maybe just okay. But I think they'll be able to run the ball with Corey Kiner. Their offensive line is experienced and I think has a chance to be very, very good. And then they brought in Tyson Veit from Iowa State to revamp the defense. They have some young guys in the secondary, so they've got to figure some stuff out. But Dante Corleone, their All-American level defensive tackle who's been battling blood clots, I think they believe he will be back maybe pretty early in the year. So I have him at 6-6. And I think I maybe was at a spot before with, year 2 of Scott Satterfield of like, man, I don't know. But they have more pieces than I thought. So 6-6 for me, 4-8 for you. Is it just because you didn't go to camp higher ground like I did?
Maybe that's it. I just don't have them springing an upset.
Okay.
To get to 6-6, they're going to need a couple upsets. I have them beating Towson and Miami, Ohio in the non-conference. I have them beating Houston and Arizona State. Those are the only 2 teams with projected win totals lower than Cincinnati that Cincinnati plays in the Big 12 this year. The other team that has a lower projection is BYU. They don't play BYU. So then if you're telling me they have more than 4 wins, you want to say they're going to win at Pitt. Okay. I think that's a toss-up game. I just gave it.
No, that's home. That's home. That's home for them. That's
it's in Cincinnati?
Pitt. Yeah.
Oh, well, either way, I had Pitt winning. Texas Tech at UCF, Colorado, West Virginia, Iowa State, Kansas State, TCU, maybe TCU. All those games with the exception of TCU, they're definitely not going to be favored. So I just didn't pick them to upset anybody.
My wins are Towson, Pitt, Houston, at UCF, Arizona State, TCU. So I guess at UCF would be a nice win, but nothing seems impossible to me. And then like their road schedule, right, is at Iowa State's tough, at Kansas State is tough, at Colorado, you got to stop that passing attack. Like at Miami might win the MAC, right? Like this is so,
rivalry game.
I just think they can be competitive. I think they can be competitive, and I think they might be headed in the right direction. Their offensive line, Luke Kander is an All-American quality guard. They think their other guard is a draft pick. Their tackles are both back as returning starters. Like they just have. I think there's a lot of teams coming out of camp like wondering about the offensive line. I don't think they're wondering about it at Cincinnati. That's a pretty good place to start.
Yeah.
And then Brendan Sorsby's a transfer, but he played at Indiana last year, and he's an athlete. He can move around. And again, I don't know they have a ton of weapons, but I think they can run the ball. And I don't think they threw it like they wanted to last year. And so if they have a guy who can throw it better and they can still run it with that offensive line, I think they have a chance to do something.
I think they're going to be what you said about Colorado, which is playing better if you're willing to pay attention, but their record doesn't tell you that.
Okay. All right. 6-6 for me, 4-8 for you. Let's get to the Mountaineers. How hot are you on what? Not hot enough. 10-2 for me, 8-4 for you. All right. So this again is I have 2 big upsets in week 1, which is North Dakota State over Colorado and West Virginia over Penn State. That's about a 9.5, 10-point line right now. I have their losses at Oklahoma State and at Arizona. I have them beating everybody else. They get Penn State at home. They get Kansas at home. They get Iowa State at home. They get Kansas State at home. Those are 4 absolute bangers against great teams. And I have them winning them all. They're going to run out of goalposts in Morgantown because every week it's like, yeah, beat Kansas State. You want to tear a goalpost down? Tear it down. So I've believed in them all off season, but I think it's one of those where like your more winnable games are on the road and your toughest games are at home. And then it's like make Kansas State and Kansas and Iowa State and Penn State come into your place and win that game. Don't give it away. They can't turn it over. Don't give it away. But we've talked a lot about Garrett Green. I think he's as dangerous of a combination of a passer and runner as any quarterback in the country with his ceiling. So if they can do that, 2 good guys in the backfield, I don't apologize for the hotness of this. So 10-2 for me. What pulls you back? Where do you see the other two losses that I don't? Again, my losses are at Oklahoma State and at Arizona.
I have them losing one of those marquee home games. I have them losing to Kansas the week after the backyard brawl, like a little bit of an emotional letdown spot. I think maybe against also like a very good Kansas team. I don't know how good West Virginia's defense is going to be this year. I don't think it's going to be awful, but are they ready to like shut down Jalen Daniels? I'm not entirely sure. And it's all like, you open with Penn State, you play Albany, then you play Pitt. Like it's a lot of juice the first couple of games that you're gonna have to maintain and bring with you when you're hosting a team like Kansas at home. Like I can just see Kansas winning that game on the road. I have them losing at Oklahoma State, at Arizona, and at Texas Tech. I have them beating Kansas State at home, beating Penn State in the opener, and beating Iowa State at home.
Look at you with Texas Tech. I was all over Texas Tech last year, and they were like 4-8 or something. I was like, I'm out on Texas Tech. All right, so we're actually not that far apart, honestly. So Kansas is next, and like if you give Kansas a win at West Virginia, now I'm starting to ask, where do you have Kansas losing? So let's go to the Kansas picks. I'm curious to see your record. Okay, we're both at 10-2. Kansas again. They don't have an easy schedule, but if you stare at it the right way, it can look pretty doable. How did you get to 10-2?
I'll just tell you the losses. The losses I have Kansas State, and then I have this is an upset for Colorado too.
Okay,
the game is in Missouri, right? It's in Arrowhead.
At Arrowhead, yeah. Because Kansas is also constructing its stadium this year. They're going to play a couple games at the Kansas City Soccer Stadium and a couple games in Arrowhead Stadium where the Chiefs play.
Yeah, so I mean, that's still going to be, I think, more than likely feel like a home game for Kansas. I don't think Colorado's got a massive traveling contingent, but I think it saps away a little bit of the home field advantage. And I like Colorado to kind of not be a part of the Big 12 race, like in terms of actually contending for the title, but be a little bit of a wrench in there, maybe beating a team or two that helps shape the race at the top of the conference. So I picked Colorado to beat Kansas at the end of the year, November 23rd.
Yeah, I mean, again, if the two tough road games are at West Virginia and at Kansas State, so those are my two losses for Kansas. And then otherwise, I don't think they'll lose any of the other road games. And then the home schedule: Lindenwood, UNLV, TCU, Houston, Iowa State, and Colorado. Like you do it. And again, I like it. I like looking for upsets, but you're stretching a little bit to pick Colorado to go in and beat. I mean, again, it's not a home field campus game. It's going to feel like an NFL stadium, and maybe in some way, like Deion Sanders will have an edge in an NFL stadium. I don't know that. Like Colorado is built more. They have a bunch of former NFL guys on their staff. Maybe they're built more like an NFL team than Kansas is. But this to me was like, I didn't know if you're going to come in at 11-1, because I think they have a chance to win every game. Like they're not at home, but they're at home. I think they have a chance to win every home game, and they only have two tough road games. So if you don't have them losing at West Virginia, like you are within shot, and I know there are people picking them for the playoff. The schedule, you can see how it could get there. And I think it's that Kansas State game. Again, it's that rivalry in the middle of the year. It's at Kansas State. I think it's Kansas State's homecoming. I mean, it could be, it's not quite late enough in the year to be a play-in for the Big 12 championship game, but it's close. Yeah. Like the winner of that game is going to be in great shape.
Yeah, and I think the Iowa State home game too, which is also at Arrowhead, I believe. That's a tough game too, even though it's a home game for Kansas, right? Like there are enough like games in there that I don't have written down as like automatic wins that I did not give much thought to 11-1. I was actually kind of surprised as I went through it that I ended up at 10-2. I thought I might be more like 9-3. But it is a favorable schedule. You're right about that. 11-1 is a little hot for me, but I don't think you're crazy.
Jalen Daniels at quarterback, you love him. Devin Neal at running back is one of the best backs in the country. They have some young guys they think are going to get after the passer. Like their secondary is pretty good. There's a lot to like for Kansas. And again, if you peer hard enough and you want to be bold, you can find a way to pick Kansas to win the Big 12.
Yep.
Kansas State. Where are you on Kansas State? I can't wait to see it.
10-2.
Okay.
I have Utah, Kansas, and Kansas State all at 10-2.
Okay. I have Kansas State at 11-1. And so in the end, I have both Utah and Kansas State at 11-1 overall, 8-1 in the Big 12. That's my Big 12 title game. 2 teams at 8-1. You wound up in a world where you have 3 teams with 2 conference losses and you've got to try to sort it out in the tiebreakers?
Yeah, I guess that would be the case. Yeah. I didn't figure those out actually to see who it would be. That's okay. It's not a tiebreaker show. You don't have to do that. So my loss again is at West Virginia. I think that's probably Kansas State's. They play at West Virginia and they close at Iowa State. Those are their 2 toughest road games. They get Kansas at home, as we said. They don't play Utah, and they play Arizona early in a non-conference game, because this is one of these weird things. There's a couple games, Utah has one of these too, where Utah-Baylor is a non-conference game, even though they're all in the Big 12 now, because they moved into the conference, but the game was already scheduled, and so there's some goofy stuff there. But the Arizona game is tough. Right? For Kansas State. So yeah, I don't that it like last year's Arizona defense going up against a pretty green Avery Johnson still early in the year. I wouldn't feel great about that. I don't think Arizona's defense is going to be nearly as good. That game is in Manhattan, so I had that as a win for Kansas State. My losses, I've already laid them out. It's at West Virginia and it's at Iowa State. Just the two toughest road trips. I have them losing.
Okay. That'd be a heck of a thing for Kansas State going into Iowa State and Farmageddon the last game of the year, knowing if they win, they're in the Big 12 title game. And if they don't win, they might fall into a tie and have to figure out tiebreakers. Like, you think Chris Kleiman in that spot's gonna let the Fighting Wildcats go lose Farmageddon?
No one, listen, you don't just go into Matt Iowa and come out with a win. You know what I mean?
All right. Those are our Big 12 picks. One last break. When we come back, the traditional old Big 10 East. That includes Michigan and includes Penn State. And we'll start off with Ohio State, our record predictions next on Kings of the North. Back for our final 7 teams on our record prediction show for all 28 Northern teams. Bill, do you have Ohio State going undefeated in the regular season?
I do not. I have Ohio State at 11-1, losing the road game at Oregon in October. I was on undefeated Ohio State early on in our prediction making process a couple months ago, but I think you sold me on the idea of no undefeated teams this year.
All right.
So and it's not really that. It's a hard game for Ohio State to go into Eugene and win. Place is going to be buzzing. It's going to be it's a 4:30 kick local time, but it's a night game on the East Coast. Just a really hard trip for an offense for Ohio State that I could see maybe still trying to find its footing, coming off of what I think will be a pretty physical game against Iowa the week before too.
Yep.
And there's just a stretch in the middle of the season for Ohio State. It's home against Iowa, it's at Oregon, they're off, and then it's home against Nebraska, and it's at Penn State. Certainly could go through all 4 of those games and win them all, but I think there's a loss in there, and so I'm going to take the best team on the road that they play in that stretch, and that's Oregon.
It's just a really tough trip. And again, I agree with that. That's where my loss is. Also, that game right now, Ohio State's, I think, a 1-point underdog in that game. It's a toss-up game on the other side of the country. And again, it's just I'm taking all of that more into account this season than I will in future seasons. Mm-hmm. So I'm using that to, because it's just the kind of thing that, I mean, you would only talk about these games as non-conference games before. And when you did, you talked about this stuff all the time. Well, you got to go 3 time zones and you have to go early and you're going somewhere you've never been before. And you got to find a hotel you haven't never stayed in, right? I mean, just all that kind of stuff. And it's just being applied to all these conference games in the Big Ten this year. And I just think it has some effect. What effect is it? I don't know. Is it a 3-point effect? Well, a 3-point effect might be enough to mean it goes from an Ohio State win to an Oregon win. Plus, Oregon's awesome. And I think that as good as this Ohio State defense is, Oregon's offense might be as geared to deal with them, blocking the guys up front and getting some of those receivers free in a quick passing game against the Ohio State corners. They might be more geared to face that than any team in the country. I will say one of the things about this that I'm curious about, and I would just listen to some other shows, people who are not picking Ohio State to win the Big Ten, the thing that you have to keep in mind, it's a little surprising to me, is that Ohio State remains a team that's built for a fast track, right? So this is one of those, it's a really tough road game. But I'm intrigued by anybody who thinks Ohio State would make a Big Ten title game and not win it. Mm-hmm. Because if they're playing Oregon again, now Oregon's having to come to Indy, right? It's unfamiliar to them. Ohio State's been there a million times. If Ohio State's playing Penn State or Michigan or Iowa or somebody like that, Ohio State's much more built to play in a dome in December than any of those programs are. So it's just, I've noted that. I think your best way to pick Ohio State not to win the Big Ten is to pick them not to make the Big Ten championship game, because that's how they did not win the Big Ten the last 3 years. Michigan prevented them from getting there. Right. But once they get there, it's built for them. So the idea that going to Eugene is not built for them, but playing anybody in Indianapolis 3 hours away from Columbus inside is built for them, that just continues to make sense for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have this loss here, but then I think it's going to be a rematch in Indianapolis that Ohio State wins. And then we'll see if they play a third time. We don't have to predict that now, but it's on the table, right? It's on the table to get the trifecta. Yeah.
Okay. Maryland. I think it gets away from Maryland more than any team in the North. I have them at 2-10. You have them at 4-8. Their quarterback situation is unsettled at the moment, and that doesn't make me feel great. I do think they have some talent on the defensive side of the ball, but it's a pretty tough schedule in some specific, like they just have a lot of toss-up games that if it starts going against them, right, you can see it getting away from them. And I don't think it means that the program's over. I just think it could be a really tough transitional year for Maryland. So I have them 0-9 in the Big Ten, 2-10 overall. And there's certainly 3 or 4 games, at Indiana, Northwestern, at Minnesota, Rutgers. Like you could give them wins there, but I didn't. So 2-10.
I don't think you have to. I only have them with 1 Big Ten win against Northwestern. I have them beating UConn, Virginia, and Villanova in their non-conference. The quarterback stuff scares me. It's like, oh, they're going to have to move on from Talia Tagovailoa. That's one thing. It's like to have to move on from that and then be this close to the season and not know what you're doing does not inspire a whole lot of confidence. So I can see them struggling there. The one thing that makes me, I guess, like curious about how it could go, it seems like Mike Locksley wants to transform the identity of the offense a little bit to be more of like a physical rushing oriented attack. I like their running backs actually quite a bit. And if the transfers that they're looking to slot in on the offensive line hit with a couple guys they have coming back, I could see that being a winning recipe. And I think their defense is going to be pretty good. So if that offensive line and run game hit, then I could see beating Michigan State or an Indiana or a Minnesota or maybe even a Rutgers. And then you're talking about pushing for a bowl season, right, that I think Maryland will be very happy with and what feels like a decent reset here for the Terps too. So I'm at 4-8 with an open mind to something greater, but also I definitely see where you're coming from on a 2-9 with kind of so much uncertainty and just not a whole lot of gimmies. There's a lot of toss-ups, but when there's that much uncertainty about the most important position, if you want to lean to the toss-ups going the other way, I don't blame you.
Somebody has to lose, right? Yeah. And so I just think it's hard. I think we both feel like we wound up with a bunch of teams at 6-6 and just barely making a bowl. But for that to happen, there's usually got to be somebody who has like a really tough year. And so Maryland in transition is just that team for me. All right, let's go to Rutgers, and I chickened out on Rutgers also. I have pulled back, which brings us both to 8-4, where for the last 3 months, 9-win Rutgers, you did not have to sell me very hard to get to 9-win Rutgers. But at this point, I have them losing 4 of their 5 road games. At Virginia Tech, at Nebraska, at USC, and at Michigan State at the end of the year, and winning everything at home. If they had Mohamed Touré, I'd probably find another win in there for them somewhere. Probably the Michigan State win. I also sort of at the end was like sort of scrounging for Michigan State wins because I think Aiden Childs and Jonathan Smith and a bunch of their receivers and Jack Velling at tight end and Nate Carter at running back will have some stuff figured out by the end of the year. I don't think Michigan State's going to be terrible. So 8-4, and I sort of am like wishing I had been able to get myself, because I think I was at 10-2 at one point with wins at Virginia Tech and Michigan State, and the only losses at Nebraska and at USC. Because again, this is a team that doesn't play Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, or Oregon, which is just remarkable. It's a remarkable feat of scheduling to avoid the four powerhouses in the Big Ten. And that's why some people are talking about them as like a dark horse outside playoff contender, but I chickened out. Are you mad at me?
No, I think you're well reasoned with the Toure injury. That's a big enough piece to pull out of the defense to worry me, because it's not. I love what Greg Schiano's done there. I don't know that he's yet built a program that can sustain losing that kind of an important player, just like plug and play somebody else, right? So they're going to have to figure things out a little bit differently on defense, I think, without Mohamed Toure in there. I don't know that it changed my projection. I'd probably still be at 8-4 either way. I likewise have them losing the road games at Virginia Tech and at USC and at Michigan State. I have them winning the game at Nebraska, which I said earlier is kind of an upset pick. I have Wisconsin beating them as the fourth loss there. But I think even if you're worried about that injury and what it might mean for the defense, it almost feels like 6 wins is like worst case scenario, right? Just based off that with how the schedule shakes out. So
yeah,
it's still going to be, I think, a pretty good season that Rutgers fans can be excited about. And I wouldn't pull back all the way on the optimism just because of the Toure injury, but I definitely get pulling back some. He's very important.
The two West Coast teams, they get 2 West Coast teams, the 2 worst Big Ten West Coast teams in Piscataway, UCLA and Washington, flying as far as you can fly without going to Ireland. And so like there are just things, and they know this. Like, this is not what the Rutgers schedule looks like next year or down the line, as much as like maybe they don't want to hear too much chatter about how good they might be. They also realize this is a rare opportunity here. The schedule gods smiled on them. So I think 8 wins is a minimum. And if they get to 10-2, I'm gonna wrap myself in my Rutgers banner and be sad that I wasn't in more on the revival under Greg Schiano. So, all right, 8-4 and 8-4. Let's get to Michigan, the defending national champions. I have them at 9-3. You have them at 10-2. I do have them beating Oregon at home. They play a crazy schedule that they are playing, again, possibly 3 of the best 4 teams in the country in Ohio State, Oregon, and Texas. My losses are Texas at home, and this is probably where we differ. I have them losing week 4 to USC at home as they continue to maybe figure out their quarterback situation early, and then I have them losing to Ohio State at the end of the year. But that's a 7-game winning streak after a 2-2 start for Michigan. If you just think, they're better than USC, and you give them a win over one of those 3 really good teams, that's how you get to 10-2. So how did you get to 10-2?
I just think their defense is going to be too good for Michigan to lose a game it shouldn't. And I would put USC in that category at home. So I have them losing to Texas because I don't think whoever the quarterback is going to be quite ready to lead Michigan to a win there. I think that's going to be a pretty competitive game. I sense like some thought that like Texas might go in there, maybe run over Michigan. I don't think that's going to happen. I have Texas winning that game, and I went back and forth on it a little bit, and I have them losing to Ohio State at the end of the year in Columbus. I just kind of feel like it's Ohio State's time to get back on the right side of that rivalry with Jim Harbaugh gone. But otherwise, I see Michigan handling business, and I think like a 10-2 Michigan with this resume is absolutely a playoff team.
So you have them beating Oregon?
Yeah. Okay. No. I'm sorry. Oh yeah. I do. Yeah. Okay. That was my one loss for Oregon. I'm sorry. Yeah.
So 10-2 Michigan with this schedule and a win over Oregon. And again, depending how good you think USC winds up being, but Texas and Ohio State could be the top 2 seeds in the playoff potentially. If those are Michigan's only 2 losses, 10-2 Michigan's in the playoff, I think, in your scenario. Now, I'm not asking you to do your playoff picks, but that's a really good resume, is it not?
Yeah, I think I think they're almost definitely in with that resume.
Yeah. I think they're borderline at 9-3.
Because I think even Fresno State is a nice kind of feather in the cap too. If Fresno State is what people think they're going to be in the Mountain West. So yeah, that's I think that's two pretty solid wins with Fresno State and USC, and obviously a very good one with Oregon. And then understandable losses almost to two of the best 4 or 5 teams in the country.
This is a really good prediction for Michigan. This would be an excellent 10-2 season. After losing your head coach, so much of your staff, all that talent, being unsure of your quarterback situation, and having this NCAA stuff hanging over the team, a 10-win season with this schedule is a huge accomplishment for Sharon Moore. You really have to be in on the Michigan defense to get here. And I'm not saying you're wrong to do it. So I don't even know. Like, I don't know what it would take for Michigan to go 11-1. And that's if JJ McCarthy had come back. Like, this schedule is just really hard.
Yeah, I'm definitely that big of a believer in Michigan's defense. I also didn't factor in like NCAA stuff. Like,
yeah,
I could try to project or like predict what might happen there. It's just kind of easier not to. And like, if it happens, we'll adjust. So I made these picks almost pretending like that didn't exist. Like knowing that it's there. I didn't want it to like impact my actual picks.
Okay. One good season for the Wolverines, one great season with our prediction there. Let's go over in the state of Michigan to East Lansing with the Michigan State Spartans, 6-6 for both of us. It's just like Jonathan Smith is too good of a coach and Aiden Childs is too interesting of a quarterback to not get them in a bowl game. So I'm not surprised that we both wound up here, but I don't think it's a given. Like, they've got some work to do, I think, to get to the 6-6. Again, this would be a good 6-6.
It would be a very good 6-6. I think maybe the win total for Michigan State is 5.5 or 4.5. So like this is exceeding that. I actually have them at 6-6, like losing at Boston College. So
oh wow. Okay.
So like I could see something greater. Like I don't know on Ohio State, no on Oregon. I don't think they're gonna beat Iowa. I don't think they're gonna beat Michigan. I have them losing to Illinois too. Like I have 2 losses that you could very easily convince me can be wins for Michigan State. Predicting 8 wins felt a little hot given the current state of their roster. So I could see some volatility with that group, but I think Aiden Childs and Jonathan Smith are going to be kind of too good in tandem for Michigan State to kind of fall apart in Jonathan Smith's first year. So I don't have them doing anything crazy. I think that the best win I have for Michigan State is beating Rutgers. But I haven't beating FAU, Maryland, Prairie View, A&M, Indiana, Purdue, and Rutgers. Like, all that sounds reasonable to me.
I have them starting 4-0, and then their next 4 games are Ohio State, at Oregon, Iowa, at Michigan, which is crazy with the bye week in between. That is wild.
Thing. Yeah.
So that is a tough stretch. And again, this sets up, to me, it's them hosting Rutgers in the last game of the season, Michigan State needing a win to get bowl eligible against a good Rutgers team that we both think is going to be good. And in that moment, Michigan State rising up and getting the win they need. So like that would be, I think, that's not quite storm the field territory, but that would be a really good end to the regular season if it actually goes down that way.
Yep.
All right. Another team that, again, another first-year head coach we've both been very excited about, Curt Cignetti at Indiana. I am at 7-5. You are at 6-6. That's a bowl game and a bowl game for the Hoosiers. I have them starting 5-0.
So do I.
Okay. So then it's just of how real, and they could start 6-0. Their first 6 games are Florida International, Western Illinois, at UCLA, welcoming the West Coast to the Big Ten, Charlotte, Maryland, at Northwestern. So if you don't want to give the home field advantage to Northwestern there, it is not impossible for them to be 6-0 going into their bye, and they'll just start the statue of Curt Cignetti over the bye week and hopefully have it done by the time Nebraska comes to town.
Yeah, I have Indiana starting 5-0 and then losing its next 6 games.
Okay.
and then
build the statue, then they tear it down.
And then, mostly I just thought it'd be an interesting bit of drama if Curt Cignetti, who was not shy with his words about Purdue when he was hired, has his streak of, I guess, non-losing seasons kind of hanging in the balance when they go to play Purdue at the end of the year.
And a bowl game. Yeah.
In a bowl game. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then I have Indiana winning that game at the end of the
year. Yeah. And we're very similar there. Again, it just gets tough at the end. They have Michigan and Ohio State at the end of the year. They could beat Washington at home. Again, I don't know that every single Big Ten West Coast team is going to lose every single road game in the Big Ten just because they have a long way to fly. So I have Washington winning that game. But again, there's some winnable games here. And I think everybody would take this, right? After, this would be a bowl game and a non-losing season would be success for Indiana in year one because they're still building towards something. They got the veteran transfer, Curtis Rourke, at quarterback, but they have some young guys behind him at quarterback, and they bought a bunch of the transfers with Curt Cignetti that sort of form a little bit of the nucleus of this current team. Mm-hmm. But there's stuff to get excited about. This would be a good way to start the Cignetti era.
Yeah, I think so. And it would allow Curt Cignetti to continue telling people to just look at his winning resume whenever someone asks him why he's going to be good there, right? So 7-6 with a bowl win is a winning season. So right. I'm taking it if I'm an Indiana fan, especially if it's going to include laying some groundwork on both sides of the ball for what you're trying to recruit to in the future in a way that feels sustainable, with a couple of nice wins.
All right, last one. Team number 28 on our list. I saved them for last because I think they are, I've said it many times, I just said it on a Penn State podcast, sort of a pivot team for the North, a pivot team for the Big Ten when it comes to this 12-team playoff era. They are built for the playoff in a lot of ways. It's the Penn State Nittany Lions, and we both have them at, again, it's what kind of 10-2 is it? Is it a Paul Feinbaum get fired 10-2? 10-2 is not good enough? Or is it a, hey, we're in the playoff 10-2. We took care of business. Mine is a weird 10-2. Do you have them losing to West Virginia also?
Yes.
So then we are both are creating the, oh my God.
Yeah.
Penn State lost its opener. Should they fire James Franklin before week 2? Completely figure it out and have a great year, losing only to Ohio State the rest of the way, which would be quite, it's a one hill roller coaster. You start going up the hill and then it plunges down into the center of the earth. And then the rest of the season is coming all the way back up from that West Virginia loss. But it would be a super interesting Penn State season. And if it goes this way, if we're right, I think it would make Penn State, if there are truly any Penn State fans who are sick of 10-2, this would be a very happy 10-2 because it started 0-1.
I don't know that it would be a happy 10-2 because I don't know that this 10-2 is not a slam dunk playoff resume.
Well, not compared to a 10-2 Michigan resume with a huge win.
It feels a little bit like what I laid out for Notre Dame. It's you feel okay. I don't think you feel great. You want, if you're 10-2, this version of 10-2 with a loss at West Virginia and a loss to Ohio State, you want Wisconsin and USC to be pretty good because that's what you're hanging your hat on there. But and I think both teams could be good. So I probably would have. I think I have Penn State in my playoff projections at the moment. But it's not a guarantee at this 10-2, which would be kind of funny to talk about how much Penn State benefits from the expanded playoff because they're always 10-2, and then for them to be 10-2 and squarely on the bubble.
My 10-2 has Penn State in the Big Ten championship game.
Okay,
so that is because it's, again, especially it's when one of the losses is non-conference, they're 8-1, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't even, and I have Oregon taking a second loss in the Big Ten. So this is an Ohio State, Penn State Big Ten championship game for me. And then I don't have Penn State winning that game, but I think a 10-3 team that 2 of their losses are to Ohio State and they made the Big Ten championship game. I think that's a playoff team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I also I have Michigan at 9-3 instead, but we're in a very interesting territory here where we agree what Penn State is, but there's circumstances of whether they're a playoff team, whether they have a good playoff resume or an iffy playoff resume is completely built around what happens with other teams where you and I differ.
I have Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, and Penn State all with one Big Ten loss.
Okay. And you did not figure out tiebreakers.
I did not. Do we even know what they are yet?
No, the SEC released theirs. I don't think the Big Ten's released theirs yet, unless the Big Ten just says, what those guys did.
Yeah, which probably they will.
Yeah. That with a library. Can we just come up with the same tiebreaker while sitting in a library, and then we'll agree to it? That's 28 teams, 2 men, 56 predictions. We are not that far off. I don't know that we had more than a 2-game gap on anybody. We did not come across anybody that someone said 9-3 and somebody else said 4-8, right. Which I kind of would have been a little exciting if we did. And you are as much of a happy, slappy, love the North ding dong as I am, because we both have only 6 Northern teams with losing records, just because we want our fans to be happy, man.
Yeah, and you're very persuasive with your Northern love. So I think you swung me on a couple teams.
That's the hope. See, we didn't even know there was Northern love. Was Northern love a thing? We invented Northern love. All right. The next time you see us, we'll be live, which means we could be swearing. I could fall out of my chair. I could spill a drink on myself. I mean, we never edit anything. So it's always one of those of like, oh, we're going live. It's like, I don't know. I mean, as long as I didn't slander somebody, I'm not sure we'd ever cut out anything out of a show anyway. Right? So we've been pseudo live. Now we're going to be actually live. So if you've been watching, we're so grateful. If you wouldn't mind telling a friend, that's the best way for the word about this show to spread, from you guys who watch it, telling other Northern football fans that, guess what? There's a show for us now. And we are going to continue to do things like this where we talk about the North, we talk about national college football through a Northern lens, and we tell the South to cram it. That's the main 3 things we're going to do here, Landis. No cramming it on this show, but next week, full of cram. So much cram
you can handle.
Yeah. So we'll get it straight. We'll make sure we get all the Southern teams in the line that we need to tell to cram it, and we'll talk about the Northern teams, and like it's games. So every Monday, it won't be next Monday. The show you watch on Monday will be us like reintroducing the show. But then every Monday show from then on is going to be Bill and I recapping what happened over the weekend. We're going to do some of that on the post-game show, kind of instant reaction. Monday, a dive into everybody. And what we will promise you is every Monday, if a Northern team, one of our 28 Northern teams played a game, we will talk about it. And then on Thursday, if one of our 28 Northern teams is going to play a game, we will talk about it and we will pick it. So we will go through every game. So those will be fast, but we'll also be diving in deep on the best games. And then during the rest of the week, we'll be talking about big issues in college football. We'll be having guests on. We'll be, looking at the whole sport, but through the eyes of the North. We're excited. We're super. Are you excited, Bill? I'm excited.
I'm very excited. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks as always to our producer, Mike Yarostowski, for making us look good and sound good. And like, he's the guy under the gun. Like, who knows? Like, who knows what we might do when it's live? And Mike will be like, oh my, I have to solve this. So he's ready. He's ready to roll. We appreciate everything he's done so far. And we appreciate you guys for being with us. We will see you live at noon on YouTube on Monday. For Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was Kings of the North.